So the last two class that we discussed about X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy. In today's class, I'm going to start another topic where it's part of TEM, SEM. There are two techniques that I'm going to start. The fundamental, some of the concepts are similar for both the techniques. One is energy dispersive spectroscopy. Generally, people call EDS or EDAX. EDAX is actually the company name. Energy dispersive spectroscopy is actually the real name. So another thing is the wavelength dispersive spectroscopy. If you look at the machine, almost 90% of the scanning electron microscope you can see with energy dispersive spectroscopy, because it's a very versatile technique, and again you can get information very easily with one single attachment in a normal scanning electron microscopy also. So that's where as a default, whenever you talk about a scanning electron microscopy, you have this energy dispersive spectroscopy that will give you the chemical analysis information, but you have to be a little bit careful with the chemical analysis information that you get from the EDS. It's more of a qualitative data rather than quantitative data. That I'll explain why. You should not actually simply blindly believe that what is that you are getting in a EDS is actually correct. So this is actually most of the students not aware of that. EDS means I'm getting in EDS I'm getting 6%, but if I do chemical analysis I'm seeing only 2%. Is it correct or not? Sometimes you get in EDS 20%, but if you do chemical analysis you get only 3%. And what is the difference, and what is actually that you are getting? Why you are getting the difference? Especially when you have elements like carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen, the amount of deviation from the real result means anything that you do with chemistry the accurate. Whatever you get from the EDS are actually more of a qualitative information. Quantitative information you can derive, but it's not very accurate. But some situation it is accurate. That also we will discuss. Maybe may not be in today's class. We will discuss in this maybe today tomorrow's class, where I will discuss in detail about what is EDS. So another technique which is actually also you can fit it in a scanning electron microscope, that is we call wavelength dispersive spectroscopy. It is the fundamental concept is very similar to what we have done in X-ray diffraction. There you use a monochromatic radiation, monochromatic X-ray that you have used. From the monochromatic X-ray, by changing the D and theta, that you got the X-ray diffraction profile there. But here, since the D is not fixed, we'll discuss, since D is not fixed, in a sense, you're getting from sample, you're getting not lambda is not fixed here. You're getting from a sample, you're getting from various wavelength. That means you have to fix somehow the D value. So that is the difference between a wavelength dispersive spectroscopy and X-ray diffraction. But the fundamental concepts are more or less similar. Okay. But again, this is this technique that we used to get an elemental identification, in a sense, elemental quantification that we use. I'm not saying this is accurate, but compared to energy dispersive spectroscopy, at least this you can say at least 5 to 10 times much better accuracy that you get with spectroscopy compared to the energy dispersive spectroscopy. So let us, one more thing that I would like to emphasize here is energy dispersive spectroscopy, that you can use it in SEM as well as on TEM, but wavelength dispersive spectroscopy, you can connect it only with the SEM. You cannot connect it with the TEM. But as I said now, you can use energy dispersive spectroscopy in SEM as well as TEM. But which system you get an accurate result? Will it be a similar? No, you may not get information which are similar. The accuracy in the TEM EDS analysis would be much better than what you get from the SEM analysis. That also we will discuss why that really happens in a system. So these are the overall picture about the energy dispersive spectroscopy and the wavelength dispersive spectroscopy. But let us get into the details of fundamental concept initially for both the thing. What is the similarity and the difference, and Then let us try to understand what kind of signal that we are getting, how we are detecting, how we are quantifying in a detection, how it is different in both the system. That we will discuss in today's class and tomorrow's class. So let me share the screen now. Screen is visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we have seen in a scanning electron microscope, when you have this sample, you have a incident beam electron. Okay. This electron interact with the sample. That's what we have seen, that is the focus electron beam comes and you start seeing a interaction volume. Okay. Fine. Now we were getting a different signal, secondary electron. Then it was going a backscatter electron. And we had a secondary electron 1, 2, and 3. That all those part we'll discuss. And also at some point of time, as I told you that X-rays are also generated. So now this X-ray that we are going to use for a quantification. Okay. That means what is in TEM it is almost similar. Now you have a sample, is a thin sample. Let's say that this is your sample. This could be your sample. Okay. So now again electron beam comes and hit. Then again something will pass on. This will be getting reflected and we get X-rays. Okay. In both the cases, you have an incoming electron, then it is interacting with the sample. During this interaction, you are seeing the X-rays are actually generated. Okay. Based on this X-ray, you are doing a quantification. Okay. X-ray, if you look at this particular interaction volume, this is the place where you start getting a secondary electron. This is the region that you start getting the backscatter electron. So this is actually the region which is of interest. You get X-rays from let me just show you. X-ray you get from this particular entire region, but our focus is so this portion. Okay, what is that difference? This is actually your characteristic X-ray. This is actually the continuous X-ray. Similar to what we have seen in X-ray diffraction, continuous X-ray, which is actually is not going to help us in doing any kind of analysis. In a sense, if you want to do any qualitative or quantitative information, it's not a fingerprint region. If you broadly say it's not a fingerprint region. Characteristic X-ray is something which talks about a sample chemical composition based on the what kind of X-ray radiation that we are getting. So this is the region of our interest. Okay, from this region you are getting X-ray. This X-ray, now you are using it for analysis. This is what say the photons is the X-ray. So what you are actually injecting is basically the electron. So what you get is photon, which is actually X-ray. So each element has a fingerprint X-ray signal that we already know. Why this electron you knock off from the inner cell. So let's say you start seeing that you knock off the electron from the L cell. electron will move to K cell. That is what we call K alpha. For this electron, this from M cell, this electron moves, we call K beta. Similarly, suppose if you knock off some electron in the electron, you'll see in the next slide. This actually each jumping of electron from one cell to another cell, it is going to release a signal like X-ray, which is actually characteristic to the particular material. K alpha of one material, it may not match with the K alpha of another material. That is actually, we call it the fingerprint region. Okay. Another thing that, as I said, this is one of the reasons. If you look at here, this is your beam diameter. If this is a beam diameter, the kind of signal what we are getting here, at least compared to the beam diameter, maybe more than 10 times higher width that you are getting, and the depth also you are getting. That means the signal resolution. So if you look at this resolution of the signal, second electron is better. Relatively, backside electron is poor, but I think the X-ray is actually the poorest signal. Okay, that means spatial resolutions are actually very poor. So this is another reason there could be a problem because of this interaction volume. As I said, the quantification has a problem. We'll discuss this part also a little bit later. How does this interaction volume can have impact on this your quantitative analysis? See, these are all qualitative analysis. You can say this element present or not. Up to that point is fine. If you want to really identify a chemical composition, a quantification that you wanted to do using X-ray diffraction, that is not actually the right way of doing it. Okay. So relatively few X-ray signals are emitted generally because it is coming from the larger depth. So automatically before reaching means to come out from the sample, it is difficult. So let's say that 100 electrons knocked off from here, hardly 2 will actually come out. That's what we have seen in many other techniques also. In X-phase, you have seen that the electron, which whatever maybe X-ray or electron, whatever that it is coming out, it will come out if it is the depth is actually very low. But this is coming from the larger depth. So the chances are actually getting the signals are fewer X-ray signals are actually only possible. So that is the reason whenever you do EDS, then you have to compare to second electron. See, I do not know how many of them used SEM and EDS. When you do SEM, immediately you start getting a signal. But if you want to do EDS, you have to wait for at least 3 minutes, 4 minutes, depending on the signal detector property. But in general, it takes at least 50 to 100 times higher time required to get a sufficient amount of signal to do EDS analysis. So these are some of the important comments. This is actually common, whatever that I'm talking about in this X-ray. Till X-ray, it's more or less common. The X-ray generation is actually common for WDS and EDS. Doesn't matter. The X-ray, it is coming. This X-ray is what is coming out from the sample is actually common for wavelength dispersive spectroscopy and energy dispersive spectroscopy. So whatever which we have discussed so far, these are common. So characteristic X-ray, we know that already. It's nothing great in it. In X-ray, that what you have said is you have basically you have electron. Here also you have electron. The incident electron is actually coming. It is knocking up this K alpha. Let's say this is your K cell, this is your L cell, this is your M cell. It knocks off your K cell electron. Automatically this is become vacant. So that what happens is this electron from this L cell will move to L to K. In that process, you start seeing X-ray, but that energy is K alpha. Instead of that, suppose from M cell, to fill this particular vacant site, the electron moves to K sites. Then we are talking about, then you start seeing X-ray will be generated. That will be K beta. Similar way, suppose you have a vacancy in the L cell. For that, from M cell, the electron moves. Then we'll talk about, then X-ray will be generated. In that case, it will become L alpha. Suppose from N cell, electron moves to L cell. If the X-ray is generated, that we call L beta. Okay. But you should remember one thing. When you have a sample, okay, when you have a sample, you have a probabilitically, you have all these things are possible. It's not a monochromatic X-ray that you are getting, because when electron interacts with the sample, K alpha is possible, K beta is possible, L alpha is possible, L beta is also possible. Okay, let me just give you an idea. What is actually, this all related to your accelerating voltage and atomic number. Okay, as I told you, K alpha is possible, K beta is possible, L alpha is possible, L beta is also possible. Okay, now let us look at what really happens on this X-ray. Maybe these are common so that I can actually pull the slide from here. Okay. Now, if we look at this particular, now this is an excitation potential. What is excitation potential? We have seen in SEM, we generally go from 5 kV to normal SEM 5 kV to 30 kV. Okay. If it is a FESEM, even you can go to 1 kV or even a 0.1 kV also you can actually use, but the upper limit is 30 kV. In TEM, if it is aberration corrected, you can go from 20 kV up to 300 kV. But in general, it is actually 80 kV to 300 kV. This is what we have seen earlier, that what is the kind of voltage, excitation voltage that we use in the TEM and ACM. Fine. Now you look at it. This is for a removing, let's say excitation means basically this K cell. Suppose if we want to remove a electron from K cell, okay, you need this much of energy. Let's say 30 is the upper limit for ACM. Okay, let's say now look at it. 30 is the upper limit. You cannot actually go beyond this particular value. That means, suppose let's say that I have a sample tin. Its atomic number is 50. Okay. Whether we can get a K alpha and K beta for this material in a EDS spectrum or not. Can you say from this particular curve whether it is possible to get K alpha and K beta? Now you look at this curve. So what it says is that for in tin, at best you can get only L alpha, L beta, L gamma, and M alpha. K alpha is not possible. That is what it is saying. Suppose I have an element which is having atomic number, let's say that I am having 20. I do not know which element it is. In that particular system, yes, this is actually a critical voltage or a critical voltage required to knock off the K cell electron. Okay, only if you knock off K cell electron only from L cell, actually electron can move to K cell. If you not knock off this K cell electron, automatically you are not going to see this K alpha and K beta. For a tin, you can get L alpha, L beta, L gamma, M alpha. So you don't have a possibility of, as I told you earlier, this is actually everything is possible. K alpha is possible, K beta is possible, L alpha is possible, L beta is possible. provided it depends on what kind of acceleration voltage that you are using and what is your atomic number. Okay. But on the other hand, if you have it, if you have same sample, you do it in a TEM. Doesn't matter. In TEM, now you can go up to, let's say, if you extrapolate this curve, let's say you extrapolate this curve, TEM minimum is you are going to 80 kV. In TEM, almost in all the material you can actually, suppose you are working at 200 kV machine, it is possible to get in all the material you can get a K alpha, K beta curve. But now, if at all you want to get a K alpha, that means this is actually a threshold value. Let's say that K alpha, if you want to get K alpha, it should be somewhere around 47 or 48 must be its atomic number. Beyond this atomic number, you are not going to get, because in SEM you have the maximum voltage that you can actually go is only 30 kV. So that is the reason some sample you start using a higher kV to get a sufficient amount of signal and to get a K alpha value, because K alpha intensity is generally higher. Okay. Suppose if you take a 20 kV, 20 kV. 20 is that like 20 atomic number sample, then even if you use, let's say that for this sample, critical would be somewhere this like 4 kV. Even if you use 5 kV, you can actually see the K alpha peak. Okay, so that is what this particular curve gives an idea. Now let us take an iron sample. Okay, what is the atomic number of iron? So now what is the atomic number of iron?
28, sir.
26.
26, because 28 is silicon. Okay, 26. Okay, now let us look at 26. 26 would be somewhere here. Okay. Now, okay, now what we are doing here is, now we are having a 20 kV. 20 kV. Okay, 20 kV. Now 20 kV is here. This is actually a critical value. Maybe we'll say that it is around 8 kV. Okay. So now what we are using is around 20 kV. Automatically you should start seeing that K alpha and K alpha and K beta and L alpha and L beta you must be looking at it. So this is actually the ion K alpha. This is ion K beta, because generally the K alpha intensity is must be much higher than the K beta. That is what we have seen in X-ray diffraction, because the probability of jumping the atom from L cell to K cell is higher than the not atom, it's electron. Basically, electron jumping from K cell to L cell is higher than the electron moving from the M cell to K cell. So this is what it is actually the K alpha. This is actually the ion L alpha. Fine. Now let us decrease this particular value. What happens and see. Now let us decrease it to 10 kV. Now it is close to threshold, means what is likely going to happen is the intensity of both ion K alpha and ion K beta decrease drastically. Okay, but still you can see that Fe L alpha. Fine. Suppose if we decrease further 5 kV. Now look at this 5 kV in this curve. Suppose if you are here 5 kV, that means the threshold value is somewhere around 8 kV. I'm saying approximately. That means if you use 5 kV, you should not get the peak in the, at least K alpha, K beta, we should not get in the EDS pattern. Okay, now if you look at it, 5 kV, it's not there. And K alpha and K beta Both are not there. You see only the and L alpha, you get C. So this is what actually the connection between this particular curve give you an idea like what is possible, what kind of acceleration voltage that you have to set for doing the EDS analysis. This is actually not the same. Whatever I said, it is common for both EDS and WDS because X-ray generation is common. X-ray generation is common. It is actually only the detector part is different for the EDS and WDS. Whether you do EDS or WDS, whatever concept that I'm saying that if you use 30 kV is your accelerating voltage, automatically you will get a similar kind of result. There is no change that you are expecting. Okay. This part we already discussed. What is a K alpha? What is K beta? Forget about K alpha 1 K beta splitting because already the peaks are very broad. You cannot see this splitting. Generally, this peak would be something like EDS peak would be. In fact, it would be like this. If you ask me, the EDS peak is like this, not this way. You will get a very broad peak. There are so many reasons are there, which we will discuss one by one. But you don't see kind of a splitting. K alpha 1 alpha 2 splitting that you cannot see, but even K beta also you can see very sometime it can actually overlap depending on the system. Okay, fine. Now let us if you have any question in this part you can ask me. Up to this point you have any question? Okay, I have introduced one particular which I will tell you. Since you are not asking question, I already have taken around 41 lectures. I have videos for all these lectures. I am going to introduce 10 mark for the those who are asking question. Those who are asking question are going to get more marks. Those who are not asking question, they are going to get 0 for that 10 marks. So evaluation pattern, though I did not tell you, but I am going to do that. Because in this subject, I'm finding that none of them are asking question. There are students they were asking question and they will get more marks. Right. Okay, now up to this part, as I said, this is your source, fine. This is your X-ray electron. Then it is interacting with the sample. This is your specimen. Now X-rays are generated. Okay, till this point, okay, both, this is actually the WDS. This is actually EDS. Both are actually common. Okay, source, specimen, X-ray generation. Up to this point, both are actually common. Beyond this, the detector part and the way, the fundamental mechanism what we use in both the techniques are very different. Okay, this is what I said. Many concepts are very similar because you can use EDS in SEM and TEM. EDS and WDS you can use it in a SEM. In fact, you can use it in TEM. But the problem with the TEM is the construction of TEM has a lot of problem. You cannot actually introduce that kind of a detector in TEM. That's the reason you don't see any, none of them in the world, there is no TEM consists of WDS. Okay, that's a different story. But the concept under which this particular WDS works, which are actually very familiar to us. If we can understand X-ray diffraction, you can understand concept of WDS. Okay. But this part is actually different. In fact, if you ask me the technology wise, historically, this is actually this technique is first people have found out. This technique, in fact, actually very recently only, means not very recently, I can say people have identified this particular energy dispersive spectroscopy maybe in around 40 years. WDS was there even before that. Maybe it was there in 50s, 60s also. Maybe this EDS, I think, maybe it may be in 70s or 80s. I do not know what actually the time that people have started using EDS in the SCM, but if you look at historically, WDS actually is an older technique, but it has its own problem. That part we'll discuss. Problem in a sense, one is actually that you need a very big setup. Okay. Again, cost involved in the installation means the overall cost involved in the initial cost installation is also very high. But it's not very versatile. This is actually very slow compared to EDS. It's slow. Okay, in fact, you're running like 5 to 6 X-ray pattern in a like X-ray. I don't know how many of them have done XRD. How many of them done used EDS and XRD? Like have seen that how people do like EDS and XRD. Any idea? How much time it take to get a EDS image, like say EDS signal?
Sir, I have used.
How much time approximately it takes? Any idea? To get an EDS pattern, how much time it takes?
Sir, for point analysis, it will take 5 minutes.
Point analysis 5 minutes. I think that means you are using the oldest possible equipment. Generally, for point analysis, you may get it in less than a minute. Okay. If it is you are doing mapping, you may require a lot of time, more time. But doing point analysis, it must be less than a minute. On the other hand, if you want to do X-ray diffraction, minimum you have to use, let's say, if you want to go from the 2 theta value from 20 to 80, the fastest detector with a reasonable quantitative information, it may require 6 minutes. This is what I'm talking about, the very recent equipment. If you compare this one and this one, see if you ask me the recent equipment in the same level of EDS, you can do it in 10 seconds, you can do it. The best possible X-ray diffraction, it can go up to 6 minutes. Okay. But WDS is something that you are actually doing the not one single diffraction profile, because we'll see at some point of time the element with certain wavelength, you use one crystal. At least you need a minimum of 3 to 4 crystal. This is a crystal that we are talking about. We'll see what is this importance of this one. Minimum we require a 3 to 4 crystal. Each crystal required a 6 minutes. Let's say that the fastest detector that you have. Then you multiply. That means 24 to 25 minutes are required to get a one particular. Let's say that this is the pattern that you are getting. Okay, same pattern. If you want to do it in a EDS, it required a 10 to 20 second. But same pattern that if you want to get in a WDS, it may require 25 minutes. So this is actually the difference. This is one other difference. Okay. But the quality of data, what you get in a WDS, at least 50 to 100 times better than what you get in a EDS. That's a different story. Okay. But the thing is, the first-hand information, getting a qualitative information is very easy in an EDS. That is the reason why you have so many EDS. Maybe in India itself, there could be at least close to lakh equipment must be there, which is used having a EDS setup. That is actually the WDS. Hardly you can number it. Maybe around 10 to 20 machines are there in India. Hardly. Only that much system has WDS setup. So that is actually the difference. we'll see what is the difference, the fundamental mechanism, the difference. We will look at it. But this is how this is a similarity, but this part is actually completely different in both the. This part is actually very different, but the final curve looks similar. The curve what you get may look similar, not exactly. This will be in the, but if you look at the information, we have one curve. Yeah, it's like this. So this is actually your EDS. It is generally it must be in the kV. This should be in the wavelength. It's almost same. If you ask me that wavelength and kV are almost, it is interchangeable quantity because the wavelength is actually inverse of kV voltage. Okay, it's automatically if you look at the curve, direction. But this is actually the pattern that you are getting. The final output more or less similar. This is 2.8 means here also you get a, you can convert it actually. Hope I have some other one. So which actually shows both kV and the, you can see here. Okay, EDS actually you have a pattern both in the wavelength and kV. These are, it's almost same. So that means the information what, so finally that you are getting is, it is almost same. These two are actually same, but initial generation is same. Only this part is actually the difference. These two are the different part that you get from EDS and WDS. Now let us look at, as I told you, W technique is older to EDS technique. WDS measures one wavelength or one element at a time. We will see what is actually the difference. This part, as I told you, it is at least 10 times better sensitivity than EDS. In fact, it is more. Get in the EDS, this is 13 EBS actually the spectral resolution in the WDS. So you can actually analyze trace element down to 0.01% because you don't have the broadness in the peak. Again, the major problem with the EDS is lighter element. Anything less than beryllium. Let's say what is the atomic number of beryllium?
So 4.
4. Okay. Anything less than this, you may not get. Beryllium is one of the filter and window that you have. It's a beryllium window. You don't get even it's somewhere like anything, even carbon, oxygen, nitrogen. These are the element. The accuracy is actually poor. In terms of quantitative, you'll get a qualitative information. Quantitative, if you wanted to do carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen, you're not going to, you should not rely on the quantitative information. See, in general, you should not rely on the quantitative information of EDS. The first thing you should need to understand, you should not rely on the quantitative information of EDS. There are at least, I can say 10 reasons you should not rely on EDS. One by one we will come. You should not rely on EDS. There are so many reasons are there, but it's a very good tool for getting the qualitative information. Quantitative means suppose you have a sample. Let's say that I have a sample. You do a chemical analysis. Let's say you have a aluminium 4% of copper. Okay, if you do bulk EDS, okay, one time you do, you can get 1% of copper. Same location you do one another time you get 10% of copper. Another time you get 6% of copper. Another time you get 2.5% of copper. Now you can get a confusion. Which one is correct? All are correct. Okay, that is actually the resolution of this particular EDS. Okay, you should not actually, just based on EDS, you should not actually make any kind of quantification. That's another thing that a thing. The another thing is the peak to the broadening, the peak and broadening X-ray mapping is improved. That we will see. Okay. Yes.
Sir, you have mentioned EDS, the quantification of less than beryllium elements is not possible. Sir, I've read also WDS, less than lithium means very lighter element. There also quantification not possible.
In both the cases, I'm saying that both the techniques are actually bad. Okay, both the techniques are not actually, you cannot actually use for a quantification. But among this technique, EDS is actually worst. That's what I'm saying. You should not use the use this technique for quantification. But these techniques are actually reasonably good when you start going towards a higher atomic number. The reliability of both EDS and WDS will become better and better. Compared to EDS, WDS is much better.
Okay.
Okay, but both the cases you are not going to get a very good quantitative information. There are reasons for that, but WDS is much better. That is what I'm trying to say. Electron probe microanalysis is reasonably better than compared to these two. Okay, but in all the cases.
So that electron probe microanalysis also uses WDS, so that is in
No, the reason is probe micro means is WDS, but again the basically what you use there is actually the interaction volumes and these probe depths are actually lower. WDS is the one used in EPMA. Okay, I know that WDS is the one that used in EPMA, but it's basically, see, you look at interaction volume because you lose very low kV there and use a lot of detection time there. The way that you calculate are actually a little bit different from the WDS. Normal, like means if you are not very much worried about the accurate information in the chemical analysis. Okay. Okay. How much time we have? Okay, now I'll do up to 6, then I'll give you 15 minutes break. Then we'll start the presentation. So let me take another 15 minutes of class. Okay. Why do we need a WDS system? As I told you earlier, one is actually the EDS is fast analysis. It gives you a sample overview. High resolution analysis, which you will get, maybe I do not. If you look at the peak, let's say that this is a EDS spectrum, this is WDS spectrum. This is what the WDS spectrum. Let's say now you have a molybdenum L alpha and sulfur K alpha. What you will get is single peak. These two peaks will get overlap. Only the 15 EV is the difference between molybdenum L alpha and sulfur K alpha. But resolution of EDS is the best possible EDS is 127 EV. That means if you have a peak, this, let's say that I do not know, like if you have to go back your another thing like resolution, this distance should be around 127 EV. If that is the case, you can actually get it in the these two peak you can distinguish. But what is happening here is the molybdenum L alpha and sulfur K alpha, the difference is only 15 EV. 15 EV means this is what in full width of maximum that we are talking about. Here it is around 127 EV. So the difference is only it is actually a 15 EV. That is the difference that you can see here. This is actually a WDS peak. This is your EDS. So this is one of the reasons why you should not rely on, because from this peak, if you want to identify how much sulfur is there, how much molybdenum is there, then you have to make guess. You do not know what corresponds to what from here. From this curve, if you want to identify the ratio between a molybdenum and sulfur, can you make any conclusion based on this particular thing? You cannot, because you don't know where is molybdenum, where is sulfur. But this is possible in many different places, because the L alpha and K alpha, two elements, can actually overlap. Though it's a fingerprint for a particular material, the K alpha of S and K alpha of molybdenum may not actually overlap, but L alpha of another material can overlap. This is actually a problem. Okay. Both peaks are clearly and easily separated using WDS, because your resolution is, you look at here, 13 eV. This is actually, you have a 15 eV. And that means you can actually easily see that particular difference in the P. That is what we are talking about. Okay. Now let us look into the concept of WDS. I'll go to this part first, then I'll come back. Okay. Here, forget about this part. This is actually the, let's say that you have a, let's say that you have a electron. Not forget about X-ray tube. It goes and hit the sample. Okay. Now your X-rays are generated. Okay. Now, you are going to do the Euclidean principle of diffraction. 2d sin theta is equal to lambda. Okay. But as I told you earlier, when you have sample, let's say that I have a sample which is having actually copper. Let's say that copper 20% of tin. Okay, I have done a chemical analysis. I know that it has a copper and 20% of tin. If I pass an actually the in this sample, if I pass an electron, so what is possible is copper K alpha is possible, copper K beta is possible, copper L alpha, I do not know what is the atomic number, just I am saying that L beta may be possible. Then tin, as I said, maybe K alpha may not be possible, L alpha possible, L beta is possible. That means now the problem is in X-ray diffraction, the lambda is actually fixed and constant. Okay, but here I'm getting X-ray. Let's say that I'm getting X-ray with 6 different wavelengths. Now, how I am going to, it is going to obey the Bragg condition, but how I am going to do the analysis? This is actually a problem. Okay. So for that, what we do is actually we call analyzer crystal. Okay, now we have analyzer crystal. Now you have an X-ray which is coming. In X-ray, in X-ray diffraction, what actually the thing is, you have a known lambda. This D is unknown. Okay. What you did is actually to get a Bragg condition, you have varied the theta. Okay. So you should remember in X-ray diffraction, lambda, known value, theta is unknown, D is unknown, but what is that varying is, we are varying this theta value. But in this particular, in X-ray, what is happening is in WDS or in a SEM, your lambda is actually variable. Means lambda is actually unknown. Lambda is actually the question. It is not actually known to us. It is actually the, we do not know what material it is. Okay, though I said it's a copper tin, I'm saying that this is not known to us. Okay, same way here, we can actually vary the theta. Okay, for that, you should need to have a d of known value. So that is the reason. Let's say that I know this particular analyzer crystal. Let's say d spacing of, let's say, okay, let me take a lithium fluoride. Is one of the standard analyzer crystal that we use. Lithium fluoride, I'm having a D220. That means for this particular material, I have grown in a 220 direction. Okay, 220 plane. For that, I know what is exactly my D spacing value. If we do that, then what happens is, if I fix this value 2.848, now we know that based on this varying this condition, automatically you should start seeing a Bragg diffraction is going to happen. This is what the basic principle. Okay, up to this part, it's like XRD. First like SCM and EDS. This part is more like a XRD. That is what the difference. So there in X-ray diffraction, lambda is a constant known to us. D is something which is there in a sample. It is unknown to us, but I'm varying the theta value to get a Bragg condition. Only you have 3 parameters here. Okay, here also you have same 3 parameter. The issue is lambda is something which is there in my material which is not known to me, because the sample is creating with a copper K alpha, copper K beta, copper L alpha, copper L beta. It can create tin L alpha, tin L beta. That means I don't have the fixed lambda value. It is, in fact, I do not know what is my lambda value. Suppose you have a sample which is having 5 different elements. In that case, you do not know what is your lambda value. Okay, in that case, what we are doing is we are keeping a analyzer crystal which is having the known D value. If the D value is known to us, automatically by varying the theta, you can identify what is your lambda. This is what actually we are doing there in this particular way and discuss spectroscopy. This is the fundamental mechanism it works. Okay, now can we do the entire spectrum, because the theta can actually go from only 73 degree. Okay, because of this instrument arrangement, theta is unlike there. You can go from 10 to 130, 140 degree you can go, but here I can go theta at max, I can go only 73 degree because of the instrument constraint. I can go only theta 73 degree. That means you cannot cover. That's what the maximum achievable theta angle in a WS system is only 73 degree. Okay. So in that case, how much actually we can move? So generally you can say like 1.9 D of analyzing crystal. Let's say suppose you are having 2.848, you can actually go in either side, you can go 2.48. That means for this, if I use a lithium fluoride as my analyzer crystal, we can actually measure K lines will come from titanium, let's say Ti22 to more than titanium 22, you can get L line, you can get from lanthanum 57. That means anything which is actually less than atomic number, less than titanium, nothing is going to come, because L line you start getting from only 57 atomic number. K alpha line that you are going to get from only after 22 atomic number. That any element, let's say anything which is actually lower than 22, you are not going to get anything out of this particular crystal. Okay. Then you have to use another crystal. Lithium fluoride, it is in a 200 direction, which is having this particular day spacing. For that crystal, it can work from the atomic number 19. Above atomic number 19, you start seeing the K alpha peaks that you start getting. L alpha you can get, because for quantification, you need sufficiently 3-4 lines so that you will get a much better information. Okay. Again, you have a problem with the applied voltage also, because you know that if you remember this particular graph, because suppose let's say that you are using at 30 kV, the element which is having less than 50 atomic number, it is not, you are not going to get anything out of it. That means you have to use only certain less than atomic number less than see titanium. If you are using that lithium fluoride 220, as I said, it start getting only from 22 to 47 is the area there you can get K alpha value. Okay, in that case, if you really want to get a K alpha or K beta, you can have only from this particular range. L alpha, L beta, you can get some system. Let's say you go from cadmium. I think in that system it is given. Suppose you have an element, lanthanum. Lanthanum can give you peak only at this particular crystal. You can start getting only from 57. Because this is actually the problem. That is the reason. Suppose you want to have an, I think this is the point. I think Arpita is coming. Exactly this point. You don't have any standard crystal which can work less than 4 atomic number. Okay, but that is not actually correct. I have one more slide. Yeah. Now you have, currently that we can actually go to even lighter elements. In previous time, you had this problem. Nowadays, I think even we can go to the even boron or other elements also, we can actually measure it. Nowadays, we have a more number of crystals. So this is actually the, means let's say I can say it is around 10-15 years back, this was actually the condition. Now we are in a much better position. So this is actually, we are talking about this. That means with single analyzer crystal, you are not going to get all the spectrum that you are looking at. That means you need minimum of 3 or 4 analyzer crystal who should work at the same point of time. For each analyzer, you have to run this 73-degree angle. Only then finally you will get a particular spectrum. That is the reason it is going to take a lot of time. You need, it's like you are creating the 5 XRD machine inside a SCM. That is the difference. That's the reason it is the whole space occupation, time consumption, initial cost investment, the overall process is actually much more tedious compared to the EDS. That's the reason wavelength dispersive spectroscopy has become very, EDS has become very famous, because WDS is something which is actually very difficult to use for a normal day-to-day application. So only the labs which are actually use extensive chemical analysis, they use this particular wavelength dispersive spectroscopy. Okay, so I'll stop here. I'm giving you, if you have any question, you can ask me. I'm giving you around 10-15 minutes break. Then you can join again 6:15. Then we'll start the presentation.
Sir, I have one more doubt.
Sure, you can ask.
Sir, how to choose that analyzer crystal for any element? Means for a particular element like this lithium fluoride, it gives K line, which gives us titanium, and L lines. How to choose that?
No, you should not choose. Basically, when you have 5 equipment, you should actually plan for at least 4 or 5 analyzer crystal. You have to run all these things. Suppose if you know, let's say that you have a sample only aluminum and copper, then you know which analyzer that you have to run. Okay, suppose if it is you have a sample which is not known to you, that means you have to run all the 4 or 5 analyzers to identify the overall picture about what is there in the sample.
So that analyzer will be already present in the instrument.
Yeah, it is like the instrument. When you buy instrument, you don't buy with 1 or 2. You buy with at least 4 or 5. Only then you can actually use that particular machine for an entire spectrum. Even one analyzer doesn't work. Let's say that one analyzer you break or something, it is getting damaged, then you cannot use that particular instrument effectively. That is actually the problem with the WDS.
Sir, and the thing which you have mentioned that for low atomic elements currently it is being seen. So that point, how it is seen means that because of the analyzer.
No, but because that has a despacing. You look at the despacing, these despacings are very high. So that is the reason you start seeing that these analyzers are going to work. If you look at the despacing, you see it's pretty high.
Okay, sir. Yes.
That is the reason you start working with the lower atomic number element. These are actually what you call naturally occurring thing. These are artificially created materials. Those crystals, because you have to make a single crystal. Those are single crystal means it has grown in certain direction. Because you cannot have a polycrystalline material for analyzer. Okay, these analyzers are actually easy to make because naturally you can easily grow this kind of a lithium fluoride 220, 200 and PET. But thallium acid patride, even you can do it in the lab. But this is what we use it in a TEM to do the rotation calibration. Okay, these are actually the recent one. These are actually lab synthesized material. Now people are using it.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you, students. So this is now I'll stop here. We'll join in 6:15.